Welcome back. Well, it aims to strengthen the inclusion, the networking and visibility of underrepresented groups in the South African gaming scene, and it creates platforms that put the issue of diversity up for discussion. That's the Goethe-Institut Johannesburg's Every Gamer Counts. The project promotes diversity and equality in and with the gaming industry. To tell us more, we joined in studio by Vulane Mthembu, who is in charge of Gamebox and Innovation at the Goethe-Institut. Mthembu, very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff, man. So what's Every Gamer Count? What inspired it?
So Every Gamer Counts is basically the name of the project, and the project came about when we realized that in the gaming industry, on the gaming space, there isn't enough representation for people of color, women, and people with disabilities. So as one of the most quickest, most fastest growing industries, we realized there need to be more impactful projects that focus on those groups, on those marginalized groups.
Yeah,
and then that's how it came about. Yeah.
So what's the status then in relation to women's participation and those with disabilities? I mean, what are the strides that the Goethe-Institut has made in terms of inclusion and including all those groups that have been previously marginalized?
Thank you. It's actually, there hasn't been as much as we would like to have in that space. So that's why we needed projects such as this, because we realized that if we don't have projects like this to accelerate transformation, it might take longer than what it's taking now. So in terms of the project itself, there has been some inroads made, because in terms of participation, there are some pleasant surprises as well that were part of the outcomes that came out of the project, where we did actually go out, which we normally do not do, where we went to the townships and actually executed things which we call game jams, and also panel discussions around the subjects, which were the panel discussions were more aimed towards the industry, and game jams were aimed towards people who are more entry level, who need to understand what game design is, how to make games, what the whole industry is about, And we did find quite a huge participation from particularly Black African women, which is what our main focus as well was. So we did get some nice, some very interesting insights. We will be presenting those at various festivals and conferences during the rest of the year, and to just more findings because the project is still ongoing.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned game jams. What are game jams?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. I always explain it to people as in the gaming community, game jams are, if you think of musicians when they get together and they create music, they make music, they make songs, unprepared, it's usually unrehearsed, and then a song comes out of that. So in game development, we have where game developers get together, we're given a theme, and then you can create a game.
Okay.
During maybe it's usually there's a time limit that's put on it, maybe 24 hours, you're given a theme, and everyone just gets together and they create games. Wow. And then at the end of it, they present their games. Yeah, those are called game jams. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the themes, that are explored in those sessions.
Okay, for Every Gamer Counts, our theme, of course, was diversity and inclusion. So the participants had to create games that speak to these themes, to their experiences as well, which is not something that's normally represented in games. As we all know, when we grew up, most games are, very Western, very European in their themes and what goes on in there. So it was very important that the games that are created there focus on inclusion and African experiences and indigenous people. Okay. But we didn't have to stress this because by virtue of just the project itself and the people's lived experiences of the participants, they were just creating games that were reflecting their environment. Okay. For example, in Alex, where we were in Alexandra, as one of the groups that was there created a game that they called it Amaroto. I will not explain further why. I did not know this about. Okay. Yeah, so and you play as a rat in it as well, and you go. So these things are games you would not normally see, but because they're created by people who are not usually given the opportunity to create, you don't get these sort of themes coming into games, right? Yes, you get your normal Grand Theft Autos and you don't get these themes. So this is very important as we go to people, and also just to to these communities highlight that there are other fields that you can do. You can If you don't want to do music, you can do, you can move into, if you don't want to do films, you can, if you don't want to do theater or anything, there's also game development.
Yes.
And right now it is the biggest industry in the world. Bigger than film, bigger than music, bigger than anything.
Now, back to, you know, the townships, and I quite like the term inclusion is now finding itself expression in terms of, you know, including everybody. So what has been your observation in terms of the participation of gamers from the townships and the previously disadvantaged communities?
I hope I answer your question correctly. As the name of the projects implies, there's actually a bit more to the gaming industry as well than just as well like playing the games, right? And also making the games. There's also things around it. That we have shoutcasters. It's a whole industry. You have people who are shoutcasters, who are sort of like commentators when esports, because there's an esports community as well, which is quite very profitable, a huge industry on its own as well. Right. Most even football teams around the world now have esports teams, and you know, you know, we have to also just let people know there are whole careers and whole there's a whole infrastructure around even gaming. You know, like even if you start a gaming studio, even if you're not a gamer, or you don't necessarily play games, or you don't necessarily develop or make games, but you can work as a you know, in legislation for gaming law and things around gaming. You can work as an administrator in a gaming company, just like in the film industry. It's just like that, you know. Okay. So also even if you're a graphic designer, you can, even if you don't have any game development training, you can work as a graphic designer to make graphics for those games. Okay. So it's a team effort. So we have to highlight that there's a whole industry that certain marginalized groups, as you know, African people, women, and people with disabilities are not being highlighted, and we need to just make them understand you can do all these other things just like in any other industry. Okay. Yeah.
So how do you measure the success of this project, in particular the gaming industry, and where do you think the gaming industry is getting it wrong, if at all?
Yeah, definitely it is getting it wrong. That's why this project like this exists. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. And how do we measure success? I think because this was actually also the first of its kind ever in South Africa, actually in the world, to such an extent we were even nominated for Women in Games Global Awards at the UK recently for its innovation in terms of what it's trying to bring to the table. Yes, yes. So mostly, I would say the gaming industry is getting it wrong in terms of making sure that access to, I wouldn't even say equipment, I would say access to information. I don't think people have that access, because as much, I would beg to differ a little bit, because most people will say, oh, you need a certain equipment, certain things to access these things, which is true somewhat. But I think what's more important, if people don't know something exists, then they will not go out and search for it and try to. I think that's the first step. Right. People need to know that you can do this. And then people are very resourceful. They go out and they find the equipment. They'll be able, and you don't need high-end equipment to make games. Yeah. You can start with even you can even create on your phone. You can go up and almost everyone has it. And then you scale up, of course, as you get better. But you don't need equipment.
Oh, so you can create it from your own phone?
There are apps that you can use on your phone. You can even use your iPad is more than enough to start making games. You can create even assets for the games using whatever. You know, you can use a pen and paper, scan it into a computer, and animate that. There's a lot you can do. So I think for me, it's more access to information. If people know this, that you can do these things, then so that's basically.
So who bears the onus then of providing such information that is not reaching or infiltrating to the masses?
I don't want to get myself in trouble. But we have. But as the Goethe-Institut, we are very active in the space, and also we. Besides this project, which was the first of its kind as well for us as well, where we're going out to communities in the townships and actually trying to reach out, but also we were also usually our programs are also in partnership with tertiary institutions that offer game design. I won't mention them now because I'll be advertising them, but you can, if you just Google game design, there are South African institutions now, tertiary institutions, where you can study the game design up to your master's level, up to your PhD level, and actually, like, you know, and study the art of it as well if you want to do that. But I think it's on, the onus is on organizations like those, and also like tertiary institutions, also like organizations that work in the cultural space, such as us, to take that and go with it. And also, I mean, the media as well. If you guys can help us out, which is what you're doing right now, which is great. I mean, thank you, Money Life, for having us. This is what's important, so people, the information can get to people, they can get access.
All right. Mthembu, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Yeah. Vulane Mthembu is in charge of Gamebox and Innovation at the Goethe-Institut, speaking to us about the hashtag #EveryGamerCounts, which is a project that aims to strengthen the inclusion, the networking and the visibility of underrepresented groups in the South African gaming scene.